to talk to you about stretching. Stretching is something that we all do. You'll see dogs do it when they get out of bed. They'll stretch and they'll yawn. You'll see babies do it. It's a natural process of being a human. But what is stretching? Now, a lot of us think that we're stretching our muscles, and that's incorrect. Our muscles don't really stretch. Really what we're doing is we're stretching our connective tissue, and we're neurologically retraining our muscles. And so in today's video, I'm going to talk to you kind of about the physiologic aspects of stretching, and then how you can manipulate your types of stretching for your conditions and your problems, and give you a better understanding of what stretching can do. Okay, so there's kind of two major components. There's the muscle component and there's the connective tissue component. So let's talk about the muscles. Your muscles are made up of myofibrils, which are made up of actin and myosin. So basically, you have these interlinking fibers, and when you contract, they go together, and when you relax, they kind of come apart. Interestingly enough is that your muscles, when they contract, it's always 100% and it's always relaxing. You can't kind of contract your muscles. And what happens is when we're increasing intensity of muscle contractions is actually the nervous system is recruiting more muscle fibers to contract. Interesting side note, with endurance athletes, what you'll find is they don't want all their muscles to contract all the time, right? Because it would fatigue the muscles too quickly. And so it actually trains the nervous system to fire those muscle fibers kind of in a rotational pattern to increase endurance. So while some are contracting, some are resting. Versus power lifters and explosive athletes, you actually want as much muscle contraction as you can have. And so you're neurologically training yourself to fire all your muscles at once. This is important when we look into stretching, because one of the things that happens is when we stretch the muscles, we're not actually stretching all the muscle fibers, we are stretching some of the muscle fibers. And a way to increase the stretch is actually by contracting the muscles, which engages more muscle fibers. So that was a side note, we'll go back to that a little bit later. So we have these fibers, actin and myosin, and they contract and relax. Your nervous system controls this contraction and relaxation. Also, it controls at what level that these fibers are interlinking, right? So, at 130% of a stretch of relaxing of these fibers, you start to get weakness. And at about 150% stretch, you start to actually tear muscles. And so your body doesn't want that, right? It doesn't want your muscles to tear when they overextend, right? And so it has this neurological system called your proprioceptive system, which controls where your muscle is in space and how much the contraction goes. And there's two components. There's the muscle spindle fibers, and then there's the Golgi tendon. And so it's basically the nerves that talk to the muscles and the nerves that talk to the tendons. So we're going to look at the muscle spindles, and they're intertwined in the muscles, and what they're gauging is how far apart the muscles are and how close they are together. And what happens is when there's a quick pulling apart, the muscle spindle fibers in the muscles will send a neurological signal and actually cause the muscle to contract. And that's what happens when you get a knee hit. It causes a quick muscle stretch, and then your muscles will fire to protect that muscle, right? And this also happens if you slip unconsciously, your muscles will contract to try to catch yourself. So your muscle spindle fibers are controlling the length of your muscle fibers, about how far apart the body feels that it can stretch. When there's injury, obviously the body feels like it can't stretch very far, right? And so it keeps those muscle spindles close together. And so when you're stretching, you don't want to have pain, because that is reinforcing a contraction signal, right? Add a stretch that's safe. And what happens is, as you hold that stretch for a long period of time, usually they say 30 seconds up to 60 seconds, but in general you're holding it longer, because what you're doing is you're decreasing that signal, that stretch signal, to the nervous system. You're getting the nervous system used to having those muscle fibers being held at a kind of what the body perceives a weakened state, or a dangerous state. And so you put the muscle fibers into stretch, and then you hold it there so the nervous system can adapt and go, okay, this is safe, we're fine. On the other end of that is we have the Golgi tendons. And so basically you have the spindles in the muscle and the Golgi tendon nerves at the tendon insertion. So they're kind of judging the tendon, right? And so what happens is if they feel that those tendons are going to be injured, they will shut the muscle off. So when the muscle spindle fibers will cause a contraction, the Golgi tendon nerves will actually cause the muscle to relax. So if you're lifting something heavy, right, and the tendon feels like it's going to get damaged, it'll kind of like turn the muscles off. And so you'll kind of see that with like hamstring strains and other things like that. So we got the Golgi tendons and we got the muscle spindle fibers, and they're kind of like inversely talking to the nervous system. One is more inhibiting, one is more causing contractions, but they're working together as a team. The point being is the nervous system is controlling all of that. The nervous system is controlling the muscles, telling it to contract. The nervous system is listening to the muscles, how far are they expanding, how much tension is on the tendons, how much contraction is in the muscles. So when we stretch, we want to let the nervous system know that we're safe and that we're okay and that there's no pain, and in this stretch position it's fine, and it will basically reset those muscle fibers. So it's not like your muscles are tight, it's not like your muscles are loose, it's more about what your body perceives as safe. And especially with injury, you'll find with injury, the body doesn't perceive that as safe, and it will cause a muscle contraction. Basically, it's causing a cast, so that you kind of have less range of motion. It's a spasming muscle. And so one of the things that we do with Tai Chi, that we do with Qigong, that we do with acupuncture is we let the body know that this motion is safe. So two key points to take away. You want to hold a muscle for a long time to help reinforce a signal that this is safe, that this is a safe position, and let the nervous system adjust to that. And you want to avoid pain when you do a stretch, because that's reinforcing that this is not safe. And then also we have the contraction phase to increase more fibers. The other thing that the nervous system does is that it's called reciprocal inhibition, or basically when one muscle contracts, the other muscle has to relax, right? Muscles work together in pairs. And so, for example, when my bicep contracts, my tricep has to relax, otherwise my arm doesn't move. And when my tricep contracts, my bicep has to relax. And so the nervous system is judging that. And one of the things that you can do with your stretching is you engage that process. So for example, if you're stretching your calf, if you actively lift your toe, contracting your tibialis anterior, you will reciprocally inhibit your calf muscles. So it will help the nervous system let those muscles go. So with the muscle system, really what we're working on is more the nervous system. So we're not really stretching, we're just retraining. I like to say that we don't stretch the muscles, we're actually relaxing the muscles. Now let's talk about the connective tissue. So the connective tissue is your tendons and your ligaments. And ligaments what connect bone to bone. And your tendons are what connects your muscles to your bones. Ligaments, we don't want to stretch ligaments, right? Ligaments are, when you have like an ACL tear in your ligaments, right? Ligaments are meant to hold your bones together, right? And so we actually don't want to be stretching ligaments. We want to be stretching so if we don't want to stretch ligaments and we don't necessarily want to stretch tendons, what are we trying to stretch? Well, outside of ligaments and tendons, we have this kind of connective tissue. And so this connective tissue surrounds every fiber of your muscle. It surrounds the whole muscle, and it surrounds connected muscles nearby, and it surrounds organs, and it surrounds your heart. And it just basically, connective tissue is really what holds you together, what provides you shape, what provides you posture. We think of it as the skin that does that, but really skin is more of a bag, and the connective tissue is really what provides structure. So connective tissue is made up of kind of two fibers. There's a collagen fiber, which is kind of stiff, and then there's elastin fiber, which is actually more stretchy. And so when we're stretching the connective tissue, we're actually stretching the more elastic quality fibers. Connective tissue is also responsive to heat, and so that's why when you do a warm-up and you increase your body's temperature, when you take a hot shower, you feel more flexible because you're actually relaxing and making more fluid this connective tissue. So I want you to think about this. We're not just stretching muscles, but we're stretching this connective tissue that flows throughout the body, that goes into our organs. This connective tissue, when you stretch, they've done research on it, it actually increases anti-inflammatory agents in the body. Or when you stretch, it decreases inflammation. Specifically when you're stretching connective tissue. And that's one of the benefits when we think about yoga and we think about Tai Chi as being helpful with arthritis and other inflammation, is that we are stretching this connective tissue. When we think about, and there's a different way to stretch when we focus on connective tissue versus when we focus on muscles. So when you think about stretching a muscle, you can very much isolate that muscle, right? If you want to do a hamstring stretch, you can isolate just a hamstring. And when you're focusing on muscles, it's actually better to isolate a very specific muscle. But when we think about connective tissue, we actually want to think about a large multi-complex movement that is pulling on this connective tissue from kind of many joints far away. If we are going to be stretching anything, it's going to be the connective tissue. And when we think about muscles, it's more that we're neurologically relaxing these muscles. Let's talk about muscle performance. Does stretching increase sports performance? The answer is pretty much no, but more specifically, maybe. So what they find out is if you do like a static stretch, which is basically just stretching without motion, what you're doing is you're inhibiting muscles. You're causing the muscles to relax. If you then go from that relaxed muscle state to a dynamic activity like a vertical jump or a deadlift, you actually will see a decrease in muscle recruitment, right? Because that makes sense. You're doing a stretch, you're telling the nervous system to relax, to turn off the muscles, and then you go immediately into trying to tell the nervous system to contract all the muscles at once. You'll see a decrease in performance. This neurological decrease in performance is very temporarily. So if you did a static stretch and then you basically ran upstairs for like 10 seconds and then you did a vertical jump, you would mitigate all that decrease in performance. But you are decreasing in performance, so that's important to realize. The other component to that is you are increasing the performance only if you are doing a motion where you're trying to contract the muscle in a very extremely stretched position, right? And so you find those with gymnastics, with martial arts, with figure skating, where you are really doing most of your sports or most of your activity in this large or exaggerated range of motion. But if you're doing like running, jumping, basketball, most sports, you're not moving in this extreme range of motion, and so static stretching to improve performance is not effective. One of the things that we haven't quite talked about is we talked about the muscles, we talked about the nervous system, we've talked about the connective tissue. One of the aspects of the connective tissue that we haven't talked about is the joint capsule. So like your shoulders, your elbows, your hips. Your joint capsules actually cause about 40 to 50% of your stiffness. And not coming from your muscles in a healthy individual, but it's actually coming from your joint capsule mobility. The other half is actually coming from your connective tissue. This is in a healthy person, not an injured person. So With most activities, what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase the body temperature to improve overall stretchiness, and then they're trying to warm up the joint capsules. And they do that, which is called dynamic exercises. So let's talk about kind of the 4 types of stretching. There's dynamic stretching, there's static stretching, there's proprioceptive stretching, PNF stretching, and then there's what I like to call connective tissue stretching. Dynamic stretching is what you see most often in the sports, is people doing range of motion, arms swinging, legs swinging, that sort of stuff. It is really good at warming up the joint capsules, and we know the joint capsules provide a lot of range of motion and flexibility. It also does not inhibit muscles, so it allows for maintenance of power. So you see most people do dynamic warm-ups. So the benefit of it is that it really warms up joint capsules, get the body warmed up, and it doesn't decrease power. The next you have static stretching, and static stretching is really good at working with the proprioceptive muscles relaxing. So it's better for more of like localized muscle injuries. So when you do a static stretch, some things that are good about it is it's safe. It's very controlled. You're not bouncing, you're not doing a crazy range of motion. You're able to regulate how much tension you put on a very specific muscle. You're also able to hold that position for a very long time. So you're able to send that signal to the nervous system for an extended period of time at a very controlled intensity, right? It doesn't have to be painful. So it's a very safe way to reset those proprioceptive neurological connections, specifically with the muscle spindles and with the Golgi tendons. When you get into PNF stretching or proprioceptive stretching, you take the safety of a static stretch, but you start to incorporate some more active muscle contractions that you would see in dynamic stretching. So for example, if we did a hamstring stretch, right? A static stretch, you would just go into a hamstring stretch and you'd hang out there. And that would send a signal to the nervous system, and eventually the nervous system would be adapted to that tension in those hamstrings and kind of reset. When you do proprioceptive stretching, you would add muscle contractions. So one way to do that would be if you contracted the quads. So the quads reciprocally inhibit the hamstrings. And so if you really try to straighten that leg and contract those quads, it would help the hamstrings kind of turn off or relax. The other thing that you can do is you can actually contract the hamstring. So we have these myelin and actin fibers that are in a stretched position, right? And we know that if we go farther, it's going to cause damage or cause the muscle to want to contract, right? The muscle spindles. So when you isometrically contract that muscle, you don't have any motion, but what you're doing is you're increasing tension on the Golgi tendon reflexes. And we know that those Golgi tendons will inhibit that muscle. So it will help reset and relax the muscle in this elongated position. So you can contract the quads, you can contract the hamstrings. So that basically describes PNF stretching. The next stretching is what I call connective tissue stretching. And really connective tissue stretching is what you want to do with Tai Chi, what you want to do with yoga, what you want to do with Qigong. And this is a sensation of stretching throughout the whole body, expanding of the whole body. We're not isolating the muscles, we're not really trying to isolate the nerves. What we're trying to feel is like almost a skin stretch or a superficial stretch that goes across many joints from the whole body. And so they're usually complex, large motions. We also know that the connective tissue stretch goes into all your organs. And so when we do connective tissue stretching, we really want to focus on our breathing, expanding our diaphragm, expanding our chest, really adding that piece into also working all the organs and all the connective tissue surrounding the organs. You also, because we're working on the whole body, also want to work on our fingertips and we want to work on our toes. Because connective tissue goes to your finger and goes to your toes. So we'll kind of break it through. Dynamic stretching, dynamic warm-ups. You're warming up mainly the joint capsules, although you're doing a whole bunch of things, right? Static stretching. You're not working the joint capsules, you're mainly working the nervous system, isolating muscles. PNF stretchings. You're isolating the muscles again, but you're using more contracting and relaxing to get more neurological feedback. And on a side note, PNF or proprioceptive stretching really gives you the best results in increasing range of motion for a long-term period. Then we get connective tissue, where we're looking at full body motions with breathing, focusing on neck position, focusing on finger positions, focusing on toes positions, or less talked about. So let me see if I can give you an example of a connective tissue stretch, right? So this is a simple motion. So you're just breathing up. Okay, so first thing I said is we're focusing on breathing, right? So we're breathing our diaphragm, filling that, because that already adds a stretch. I can feel it, right? And now we're focusing on filling the chest. So now I feel a stretch in my chest, right? And now I'm taking my hands to an extreme, and my fingers too. I'm flexing my hand back, so I feel a stretch all the way to my fingers, right? And now I feel a stretch from my chest. I have a stretch to my fingers, and now I start to opening up the front chest, right? Just feeling a stretch down to the toes. So I'm focusing on expanding that stretch down, and I'm focusing on expanding that stretch up. And I hold it, and I contract. Right, that's that PNF stretching, getting those muscles contracting. And then I relax with an exhale, right? And now I'm working on different connective tissue. And we know relaxing it, we know breathing in stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, and we know that breathing out stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So as I breathe out in this position, I'm telling the nervous system to relax. I'm pulling on the connective tissue. If I want, I can, depending on the stretch, but sometimes you're looking at where you're looking because you're isolating connective tissues in your shoulder. So there's this filling and then exhaling. And as you exhale, you're kind of, you're decreasing space, but that's also adding tension into different areas. Right? So I can go sideways and I hit kind of these obliques. I can go back, hit a little bit more rectus abdominis. I can go forward, hit a little bit more of the QL. Glute medius, kind of more of the hamstrings. And so you're doing these little micro adjustings to feel where the most tension is and how you can get that most connection throughout the body to stretch that connective tissue. And when we're doing Qigong, when we're doing Tai Chi, when we're doing yoga, we're kind of focusing on different aspects of that, right? With Tai Chi, with yoga, we might go into a warrior stance, which is going to be flowing a little bit more, opening up joint capsules. Same with Tai Chi, we're working with dynamic warm-up with joint capsules. We're holding muscles slowly, so we're getting contractions of reciprocal inhibiting of muscles. So that's the complexity of stretching. And that's how I want you to kind of think about it when you're examining what you're doing and how you're offering it to patients. Is it a specific muscle injury, like a hamstring tear? All right, we want to isolate that. Is this inflamed connective tissue, right? Maybe you want to do more connective tissue stretching for fibromyalgia, for systemic arthritis. Is it after an injury, the pain muscle's gone, but they have a lot of stiffness and weakness because they're holding? Maybe we'll do some more PNF stretching.